With the new X series of scratch-offs from the New York Lottery, you can multiply your winnings up to 100 times. The X series from the New York Lottery. It's a better way to multiply. You must be 18 years or older to purchase. Please play responsibly. On this week's episode of Bill's Pod Squad, PSC supervising producer Michelle Girardi Zumwalt joins us to talk about the new Bills documentary, Growth Mindset, that drops on Thursday, March 11th. She shares her top 3 stories she has produced in her career and shares why one phone call with Scott Norwood was so important. She also gives her advice to women who want to work in sports and more. Bill's Pod Squad starts right now. Welcome into this week's episode of Bill's Pod Squad, presented by the New York Lottery. Maddy Glab here is your host, and on with me today is a boss woman, Michelle Girardi Zumwalt, aka the supervising producer at Pagula Sports and Entertainment, aka one of the faces behind the epic documentaries you've seen about the Bills and Sabres and many other pieces that you see on those websites. She's one of the people that makes it all happen, makes the sauce come together. So we are so excited to have Michelle on with us today, who's also one of my bosses.
Hello, it's good to see you. I was just thinking, I don't think we've seen each other in person since August? So it's, I know we've been working together so much and we see each other like this, but we got to get together soon.
I know it's been a weird world, but we are at the end of the COVID dog days. Hopefully we can get back to normal and have a normal season next year where you and I can maybe be on the sidelines or around the team a little bit more. What a wonderful world that would be.
Dream big.
Right? Today, we're going to discuss one of her most recent projects, the Growth Mindset documentary that is dropping on Thursday, March 11th on YouTube at 7 o'clock Eastern time, and also on Friday, March 12th at 6:30 Eastern time on WIVB TV channel 4. We're going to talk about life in the biz and more. So you do not want to miss out on this convo or this awesome documentary that I've gotten the chance to take a little sneak peek at. It hits you in the feels. I've got to say, Michelle, you always make me cry with these documentaries. So, but before
the greatest compliment,
right? That's the goal of a producer, is get the tears going, right?
Exactly.
But before we get into what you've been up to lately, let's do a top 3 to kick off our conversation. You have produced so many stories and been a part of creating so many stories, whether it's been at the Bills or the Sabres or with NFL Films. So what are your top 3 stories that you have produced ever?
That's such a tough question. That's like choosing between my children. Where do you put Trey White Goalie Academy? How does that not crack the top 3, right? But I guess I got to go with 30 for 34 Falls of Buffalo. That's probably the most well-known piece that I've produced. It's, the most famous. It's part of one of the greatest sports documentary series ever. So that's got to be probably number 1. It was the piece I was working on when I got hired here, actually. So I did a bunch of the directing and producing and researching. And then when I got the opportunity to come here, I had to leave right as we had just started editing. So I never got to finish the edit, but I did do a lot of the directing and interviewing for that one, and I'm very, very proud of it.
Just throw you in the fire there.
Yeah.
For Falls of Buffalo. Jeez.
Yeah. It was a crazy experience. I'd been a producer at NFL Films for probably 8 or 9 years when the project came up, and Ken Rogers, who is the legendary 30 for 30 NFL Films producer, came to me and said, we're thinking of pitching to ESPN a story on the Bills' 4 Super Bowls. Are you interested? What do you think of this? Are Bills fans going to buy into this?
Don't make me relive that. Why are you asking me to be a part of this?
I have to tell you. So I was in his office at NFL Films, and he made me watch the 4th quarter of Super Bowl 25, which, yes, I had not watched since I was 8 years old. What Bills fan has gone back and rewatched that? Now, I'd heard the kick, especially working at NFL Films. You could be sitting in your office just minding your own business, and somebody next to you is playing that, here it is, the shot heard around the world.
No.
It was awful. But, and every time I would close the door and try to hide. But in this case, I had to face it. I was sitting on this couch in his office, sweating. I was getting so nervous. It was a bizarre, physical reaction to knowing what was coming. And I had to exercise the demons of my childhood to get through that. So it was crazy. But at the same time, I got to meet, my idols growing up. I got to meet Scott Norwood. I was the one who not to toot my own horn, here I am.
Do it.
I got him to participate in the film because he didn't do very many interviews at all. Very few. He'd done one for SI, maybe a decade before this. But otherwise he was sort of mysterious and sort of disappeared. So when I was interviewing Bruce DeHaven, who was the special teams coach for the Bills during those years, I kind of gained his trust, and he was like, I can tell that you're coming from a good place. You're a Buffalo girl. You're going to tell the story the right way. I'll call Scott for you and tell him to start returning NFL Films calls. And so NFL Films at that point, like it's such a huge apparatus. Like there's so many people who have different jobs. So I was not in charge of like trying to recruit people for the show. They turned it over to me though, and were like, you be the one to call Scott. Like you should be the one to talk to him. And so the one day I was home with my kids, and he happened to call me back, after 3 or 4 tries.
And your heart drops as you see his phone, or you see his name pop up on your phone, I'm sure.
I did. And then I had like these toddlers, and I'm like running into another room to take the call, and they're like, mommy. And I'm like, no.
Shut up, it's Scott on the phone.
I know. And it was great. He's such a nice guy. And now we're friends. And it's like, when you think back to, when you're a kid loving sports and these larger than life figures, and now that you have all their numbers and you consider Scott Norwood somebody who like haunted me as a kid, as a friend, it's such a great, fulfilling experience, and crazy too.
Oh, that's amazing. All right. Number 2, what is your second favorite one?
I'm going to go with the first season of Buffalo Bills Embedded, because
okay, what season was this for people who don't remember, / me who came in after you guys started those?
Right. So this was 2018. Okay. So it's the summer after McDermott came to Buffalo. He broke the playoff drought. We went to Jacksonville, lost in the playoffs that year. It was the big, locker room moment, the Tyler Boyd TD, Kyle Williams decides to come back. So it was that summer. We got greenlit to do kind of what everyone says, our own version of Hard Knocks at training camp. And it was pretty no holds barred. Like we were in every morning meeting. We were in every coach's meeting at night. We worked from, 7 a.m. until 8 p.m. when the coaches were done. But then we all went back and had, planned for the next day, had a production meeting at like 11 p.m. every night. It was crazy. You were working, straight through, getting like 5 hours of sleep a night, maybe, and then just right back at it. But we had so much great access. We had wires at camp every day. And I really think that series showed Bills fans who McDermott really is, and we were able to really, put his message out there. Everyone kind of heard about the trust the process stuff, and it was kind of a joke, but I think not a joke, but people would talk about
the gimmick one-liners that people are like, is this real? Is this not real? Is this just another coach who's coming in and is like, you gotta grind, or whatever word they want to use. But for him, it's the players gravitate towards them. They love that stuff.
Exactly. And you could see the consistency in his message and how the players responded to him. So I just thought that was a really great experience. And it was really great for our fans to get to see that side of him, and ESPN picked up on it. It was just such a fun, crazy experience, and for the crew, where you're just like living it and you feel like you're at training camp yourself, basically. I mean, how it is.
Yeah. And as a producer, to get that type of access, to be able to be in meetings like that and to have wires at every practice, like that is a producer's dream. And like 9 times out of 10, that does not happen when you're producing a documentary or a feature. Usually it's 9 times out of 10, things go wrong and you just have to scrap together what you have to tell the story.
Exactly. And it's so different when you're producing in sports and when you actually work for the team, because the truth is, McDermott is the boss in every situation. I don't directly report to him, but he's the boss. So you really need to earn his trust and have him allow you in. It's not like reality TV where you have people who are just dying to get on TV and you're like, hey, will you do this? And they're like, absolutely. Like, we are observing what they're doing. I'm not going to say hey, coach, maybe in this meeting, like, could you try working this thing in from practice yesterday? It'd really give us a nice, full circle moment in the show. Like, no, I'm not getting him. You're really just observing what he's doing and, grateful that you're there to see it. And then from there, you have to figure out how to put the pieces together.
Yeah, it's like a puzzle, but it's the best part when it all comes together and you see that finished product and all the long hours and all the no sleep that went into making something happen. And you're like, wow, this was totally worth it all. But what's number 3 on your list?
So I think number 3, I'm going to go with my man, Josh Allen, and my other man, Cade Spinello. So the Super Cade story.
It's a great story.
Yeah, it was great. So Embedded was also Josh's rookie year, which, but at the time, at the beginning of training camp, we didn't know that he was going to end up being the starter that year. Like he was sort of, second, third man on the roster. It was his rookie year, who knew? So then by December that year, he was obviously playing, and, this was our first opportunity to really get to tell his story and to get to know him. And, I'd recommend everybody go check it out. It's still on YouTube. The Super Cade story. So Cade is essentially a kid that Josh met at Jordan Palmer's football camp. We all know how big Josh is at training with Jordan in the off season. And Cade was diagnosed with a brain tumor when he was, I think, 5. And, he's now a motivational speaker. He's spoken to the Packers. He came and spoke to our team for this piece that we did. We flew him and his family out here to see Josh, and just the genuine interaction between them and the love between the family and Josh. And you can tell that it's not just something that Josh is putting on. He's not putting on a show for us. Like, he actually really loves his family, loves this kid. They're he's part of the family essentially. And, letting this kid have this like great Buffalo experience. Josh took him to a Sabres game. He got to ride the Zamboni. Josh stayed the entire game. Like, he could have just come and made a 10-minute appearance for the cameras and left, but he stayed for the whole game. We went downstairs after to introduce Cade to some of the Sabres, Jack Eichel and Rasmus Dahlin. And there were, some other kids who were down there outside the locker room. Josh stayed and like took pictures with them. Like, he is just, it really made me love him and feel like, this is a guy worth rooting for. And this is a guy that Buffalo deserves. And, you can feel good about supporting him. So I would say that's number 3.
I remember watching that when I was prepping for my interview when I applied for the job with the Bills, and I was watching a bunch of the stuff that you have produced. And I was like, wow, I need to work for this team that has produced like these high-end documentaries and features. That was one of my favorites right off the bat. But I've got to say, Trey White Goalie Academy, It Might Be Chilly featuring Steve Tasker, and that Grammy-worthy production and performance that he put on. Those are also a couple of my favorites that I'm sure you have like 20 other favorites that you wish you could just loop into the top 3 or top 100, because at this point in your career, you've probably produced hundreds of stories, which is crazy to say and think about.
That's true. I know. And like when you say it might be a chilly thing, like who knew that would be such a phenomenon? Like, we had so much fun producing that. And I have to tell you, like, I've never been more nervous during a game than during that Broncos game this year, because we spent a couple weeks producing that. We knew how cool it was. Like, Steve put so much work into his character. We were going to get the script right, getting all the every shot had to be perfect. We were up late, the night before, even actually during that day, we were finishing it. And then knowing the Bills need to win this game for us to put this out there, because we specifically say in this script, we're not backing in. And when we win this game, this is us saying like, we are going into the playoffs, on our own terms. If we lose, then we have to say, well, if Miami loses tomorrow, then technically we're in the playoffs, but we didn't clinch it ourselves. So it was like, we need to win this game and make a statement. And so even though we ended up kicking butt that game, before the game, I was so nervous. Like, we have to win because this will be such a wasted effort.
You call it, hey, Coach McDermott. Yeah, this is Michelle. We just spent 3 weeks putting together this video. And by the way, you guys need to win so that it can drop, because if you lose, then we can't put it out at all.
Yeah, that's what I need to tell Coach McDermott. We've already made a video saying we've won the AFC East.
No,
so are you cool with that? Yeah, he would be. I'd be out on the street.
I remember watching that. Tasker and I were walking into the office at the same time, and he was so excited about it. And he was like, have you seen the piece that's going to drop if we win? And I was like, no, I've heard about it. He's like, I've got it right on my phone. So we're walking in the building, and me and Steve have cried together more than like anybody I know that I've worked with. So we're walking into the building. He's got tears streaming down his face. So do I. The game's going to start in a couple hours. And we walk in and people are like, are you guys okay? We're like, yeah, we just watched the video. It might be chilly. Like, I was like, that's the best video I've seen in a long time. So again, there you go, getting the waterworks flowing for me, and probably for so many Bills fans. You have caused so many tears, Michelle. How do you feel about that?
I feel great. I love it. Keep crying, people. It fuels me.
Right? All right. Well, we've got to talk about the growth mindset documentary. Where did that idea come from? And give us a preview of some of your favorite parts and what we can expect from that documentary.
Yeah, so that came from at the end of the season, we did a documentary kind of wrapping up the whole season. So you can find that on YouTube too. I'm just going to plug the YouTube channel the entire time. That one's called 4 Years in the Making. And, you know, it was really about all the emotion of the season, how great Josh and Diggs were together, you know, going through COVID and how the fans responded to the season, and then winning the AFC East, obviously, because at the time, you know, we hadn't played a playoff game yet. So that was great. And then we were able to do another one on the Ravens win, where we followed the chefs, you know, our fans, the chefs, through their experience of watching the game, and really gave the fans' point of view how amazing it was to finally be back in the stadium and to win that game, to move on to the AFC Championship, like what that felt like and how amazing it was. You know, the Taron Johnson pick six, like the whole thing. It was just an incredible night. And then at the end, we're like, well, we didn't win. You know, we lost the AFC Championship. You know, it is what it is, as they say. But it felt like we needed one more show, one more expression of how great this season was for the fans, one more memory of what we really accomplished this year. We didn't want to go off with a whimper and say, all right, moving on. So one thing we had been talking about was doing a show on all the guys who had McDermott's guys, like the guys who had been here all 4 years with McDermott, you know, and Jerry Hughes being the one who was actually here before Sean McDermott came in. So it was sort of hard to do during the season because everything is so crazy. So now that we had a little bit of free time in the off season, which, as you know, doesn't actually exist, we were able to.
You picked the 3 weeks that we get that it's actually chill, Michelle. You just filled your schedule up right there with another documentary right before free agency hits. No big deal.
Everybody else is on vacation, and I'm like, hello. Do you guys know where this one shot is? Here at 11 o'clock last night, like with the editor, Andy Quinn, who's amazing and who produced or edited so many of these things that I've been referring to, including the Might Be Chilly video. He's been like my partner in crime all season. Last night, we're like, all right, we got to get this down for the WIVB version because, you know, the TV is set time. Like, what can we cut out? I don't know. We're going back and forth, and I'm like, off season. This is great. But yeah, so I was listening to Coach's, you know, post-season press conference, and he referred to growth mindset, as he does several times. And that, it just kept sticking to me this time though. Like, really, that's what it's all about, you know, how they've grown over these 4 years, but how they're going to continue to grow. And what better message to put out right before free agency than to look back and say, here's kind of how we got here, but we're not done yet. We're going to keep, you know, building this team, not just during free agency, but during the draft and the rest of the off season through the programs that we have and through our coaching staff to, you know, take that next step next year. So this kind of goes back to the beginning of McDermott. We see, you know, his opening press conference. We could look at the first time he was mic'd up at training camp back in 2017. And we look at some of the players who have been here the whole time, you know, his first draft pick, Trey White, Deion Dawkins, you know, I think the second round pick from that year, Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde, who came in free agency that season, you know, guys like Jerry. So, and of course, Josh Allen, who has not been here all 4 years, but who could be, you know, a bigger part of the team than Josh. And we kind of go back and go through their careers with the Bills and remind you of all those cool moments that maybe you forgot about or never saw. So
yeah, I really loved how it did take you back to the beginning with McDermott and with some of those guys who came in that first class, whether it was through free agency or through the draft, and help you relive everything. I love in feature stories and in documentaries how you can recycle so many things that we've already used, like Sean McDermott's first press conference. I mean, that is going to be used until he is not the coach, and hopefully he's the coach for the Buffalo Bills forever. Maybe we'll be using it when he's retiring as the Buffalo Bills head coach and he's, you know, in his 90s and finally giving up football and has taken us to multiple Super Bowls. But I think it's amazing how you can use so many sound bites over and over again in different types of ways that just either bring back some memories for people or help take them back to that time when he was fresh as a new coach, his first gig, you know, in the NFL, not knowing what we could expect from him as a new head coach. And, you know, now he's entering his 5th year and we've seen what he's done in such short amount of time. But how do these stories come to life going from idea to finished product? Because I know you probably have so many ideas out there. Some of these ideas probably don't even make it through the beginning stages of actually happening because a multitude of things. They may not be possible. There may not be enough video to show everything. The interviews may not be possible. So how do the cooks in the kitchen make it work?
I make it up as I go along, Maddy.
So. It's you laying in bed at like 2 a.m. being like, oh, this would be a great idea. I got to remember this.
I literally woke up the other morning and was like, oh my God, I totally forgot about this play that we had Eric Wood break down and Dion Dawkins, like got on the horn and was like, how did we not put this in there, guys? We have to fight. And like, this has already been approved. Like everybody was like, this is great. And I'm like, no, wait.
Like Michelle, no more edits.
So, that is definitely a thing that has been said to me multiple times. Thank God that Andy, like I said, who I've been working with, and all of our editors are great. I'm singling him out simply because, should I say that again? Because my ding. All our editors are great, but I'm singling him out specifically because, we've been working together so much, but he has that same mentality where it's like, oh, we have to, finish this, but if we spent like the next hour, we could really make it so much better if we just did this. And he's always on board for that. So, so it's basically with this one, like you said, I kind of took that NFL Films approach to it, which is like, we had such a huge library there. There are so many shows that we would do that would just say, let's go find the best stuff that we have with this guy and build a feature or a segment of, looking back at his career and just showing you the best that we have. And so we rarely have time to do that here because everything is just like, go, 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 to go back into our archives and search them and say, what do we have that maybe hasn't been seen, or how can we tell this in a different way? That was the goal of this piece. So it started with, the growth mindset idea. And then, because we were building it for TV, it sort of gave me a little bit more structure. So you could say the first block will be McDermott, the second block will be Josh, et cetera, as opposed to a show where you're just doing for YouTube, which you can kind of, it can be whatever length you want. You can go on and on. Like I felt bad, I wanted to do more on Taron Johnson because he had that huge play at the end of the year. And there's obviously a ton to his story. So, I wish that, we had a little bit more time for him, but I'm like, well, maybe in the next one, you gotta save some of the stories, I guess, for the next act. So
what was it like producing during a pandemic season? Because a lot of people have said to me and have probably said to you, it must have been really hard to do your job. A, yes, that's true. But B, I feel like we did so much more work than we normally do in a regular season because we were the people in charge of getting the narrative out there when so many fans couldn't be around for training camp, couldn't be at the games. So it's like we had to dig deeper in a sense and give the fans more than what they've ever seen to show them what was going on, but also to like take their mind off of the fact that we were living through a pandemic and life wasn't great this year. So how were you able to do that? And what was it like?
I think we were all able to do that because the Bills were so good.
Yeah.
Like that was just, imagine if we had a bad season this year, how different this whole thing would be. Yeah. So the Bills and Sean McDermott and the staff and the team really helped everybody out by having such a spectacular season. So there was so much for us to talk about, Josh Allen and the whole story with his grandmother. So even in that case, the fans like giving that positivity back to us and giving us that great story to tell, donating over $1 million to Children's Hospital in Josh's late grandmother's name. Like we were able to do it because I think we care and we're all so passionate about this. And I think we all are in this business because we want to be able to bring fans into this world, right? Like that's why we do this. And I think that's how you're successful at it, because you actually care and you actually take the time to get to know the fans. You're on social media, learning about them and what they like so that like, okay, I'm going to include this in the show because I know that this is what the fans are going to respond to. And there's nothing better than when you think like, I think the fans are going to love this. And then you see comments come in and that's the part that they are like, oh my God, that was so funny. Or that was so great. I've been wanting to know about that. So yeah, I mean, it was a challenge, for us, like in the production side, audio was awful this year. Like I've never, ever used a Zoom interview in a piece before. I wouldn't even have considered it.
Usually, like, by the way, people who are listening, like we take the time to set up audio. We take the time to set up interviews. You may look at a shot in a normal year and it's an interview setup, or even now we're getting back to more normal interviews. And you just think the person sat down in the chair and you hit record. No, lighting and audio could take 3 to 6 hours if you're really trying to perfect everything and have the light hit on one side of your face so it can be more dramatic or XYZ. So these are things that take time and that people like to nitpick at because it's a part of the finished product. And here we are on Zoom and it's like, well, you have terrible lighting. I can't do anything about that because you don't have a ring light.
Oh, but don't you?
Yeah. Oh yeah, I do.
That's actually a Christmas gift for my daughter for her YouTube videos, that she doesn't actually have a YouTube channel, but she likes to make videos. Yeah. So yeah, but it's true. And like, that's how, you know, you win awards, because everybody's competing to say like, wow, look at the really interesting way I
in the
shot
background.
What? I was taking them off. So I'm in my guest room. Like, I don't have a fancy setup here. And like, I was too lazy to actually like go around my house and find one. Plus my kids are like doing school out there. My husband's working from home. The dog's out there somewhere. So I was like, I got to stay in here. But I brought a couple of the girls up to display. And I told my daughter, I'm like, what's the point of these if you can't flex every once in a while? Like,
no, I totally
nobody's been to my house. Nobody sees them. So what are you going to do? But yeah, so it was weird, but it was also liberating in a way, because it gave us the ability to interview Steve Young and you'll see him in Growth Mindset, but we interviewed him for when we did the piece on Josh and his grandmother. And, you know, typically, you know, trying to schedule Steve Young for an interview probably would have been impossible. But in this case, we did it over Zoom. I was able to interview Peter King for another piece, you know, very easily. Like, hey, what are you doing? Hey, how about tomorrow at 4? You know, it's just, I hope that we keep some pieces of it going forward and it becomes industry standard to say it's okay to use a Zoom interview, but I also do not want to lose that artistic part where you really do put the effort into making an interview look and sound really beautiful.
Yeah.
Okay.
I want to ask you about going on the road and what it's like to produce and tell some of these stories from the road, because we all have stories of road life and how things just don't happen normally and are different, or you get a different story based on the story that you thought you would be telling, but because of where you're at and the interviews that you get or the surrounding, it completely changes, or you always leave the road with funny stories. So please share some of the things that happen on the road that, you know, fans and your everyday person may not know unless they were in the room or on the road with you and your team when you're doing these stories of guys in off season, or, you know, anything that takes you out of Buffalo.
Yeah, I think my favorite on the road story is probably, we went to New York for the Winter Classic a couple years ago. And, you know, it's a New Year's Day game typically, and it's New Year's Eve. And the Bills are playing the Dolphins and have a chance to get into the playoffs. So we went to the New York City Buffalo Bills backers bar, which at the time was McFadden's. It was a place that I used to go to when I lived in New York, and became friends, you know, part of the Bills backers there. So it was cool to go back. But we're watching that game and brought a camera because, hey, if we make the playoffs, you know, there could be a really cool reaction here. So let's see what happens. And then who knew that we'd have the most dramatic entrance into the playoffs ever, you know, in our case anyway. And we were there, you know, so a lot of those shots that you see of like people celebrating in a bar are from McFadden's in New York, because we were there, you know, on a Sabres trip to do a behind the scenes with the equipment guys at the Winter Classic, and happened to catch this really awesome, you know, incredible moment in Buffalo Bills history. And then you're in New York City on New Year's Eve, you know, celebrating this, although we weren't celebrating out in Times Square at the bars. I was, you know, on the horn, like trying to get fan reaction, and like we're all texting each other, like, who's going to the airport? Like, people are talking about going there. This was the first time that had happened, you know, at least you know, in decades, you know, probably not, I don't know if they used to go in the 90s or not, but so it was like a whole crazy world open up for us all of a sudden. And we were all, I've never been so happy to be working on New Year's Eve in my life. So yeah, that was nuts. And then another trip to New York. And I feel like I've had flights canceled. I had to drive back randomly from New York more times than I can count. But we went a couple summers ago on a Sabres trip with Western New York heroes. We were bringing them back to relive the Sabres Rangers game after 9/11, which was the first, you know, meaningful professional game played on Manhattan after 9/11. So we brought a couple of Western New York heroes who were veterans, you know, from the wars that were fought in reaction to 9/11, back and for a tour of MSG and to visit the 9/11 memorial. And so Razor and Marty and Brian Duff were on the trip. And of course, our flight got canceled. There's a huge it's like August, just a huge downpour. So we're like getting drenched. Marty Baron is like out in Manhattan trying to find us a minivan so we can drive home, because you never want to like stay over again. Like we all have like, you have kids to get back to, work to get back to. It's like hotels in New York are like $450 a night. And it's like, we all just want to go home at this point. So he's out in Manhattan. Razor's like trolling him on the text thread about trying to get this minivan. He had to like go all over. He like pulls up in front of the hotel, and we're like all in like puddles of water because it's raining so hard, trying to get all of our luggage in and cram all the camera equipment in. Like the trunk is about this big. So Brian Duff and I are in like the middle row with like our bags on our laps. We're soaking wet, drenched. Razor's trying to like drive us out of Manhattan during the storm. There may have been, oh no, actually it was Marty trying to drive us out of the time. And then when we got out of New York, Razor insisted on taking over the driving because of course Marty, doesn't drive right. There may have been a speeding ticket at 2 a.m. at one point. I know, it's a little fuzzy, but all that stuff, that's just like team bonding when you're on the road. And it's so fun to be with those guys. And again, like I was saying with Scott Norwood, like you're sitting in this minivan with, Marty and Razor up front bickering like an old married couple and like laughing, and we're all having just so much fun, and we're soaking wet and miserable and like crammed in like this with all the bags. And you're like, we're going to laugh about this so much, in the years to come.
Yeah. Life on the road, what everybody is probably gathering from this is it's not glamorous. You may think we work in a glamorous field, but once you get us on the road and a lot of the projects that we're on, I mean, producing a documentary means no sleep. It means you're up and doing stuff at odd hours of the night, especially when you're following a team that's kicking butt like the Bills were this year. You're running to the airport to get footage of the fans at the airport. You're then trying to get everybody in sync with where is this person, where is that person. And I mean, it takes a lot of work, but it is all worth it. And it makes it, working in this industry is just so much fun for so many reasons. But like you said, the team bonding aspect of it and the people that you get to work with, it's so wonderful because we work crazy hours that the people that you're at the office with every single day, like become your family. So as I'm saying all of this, what are some of your favorite parts about working in this industry and the crazy life that we get to live?
I think the favorite parts are definitely when you're there to experience someone else's like greatest moment of their life, or like, if it's a little kid who gets to meet an athlete, like the Cade story, like he and Josh already knew each other, but like seeing that bond and knowing how much it means to Cade. But other kids that I've worked with, and like their hope, if they're through Make-A-Wish or something, another program, like their hope is to meet this athlete and you're able to provide them that experience. Like that is definitely 100%, the best part. And even an adult, like we had a couple years ago, there's an organization called Treasured Time that, provides experiences for adults who have terminal illnesses. And we had this man, Jay O'Leary, come during the off season, and his goal, he lived in Connecticut, but he grew up in Western New York. And his one wish was to bring his family to Buffalo and to see the Bills facility. And you think about that, like this is something we take for granted every day that we're here, previously when we used to be able to like actually walk around the facility wherever we wanted to go and like see the players, and you might pass them, hey, how you doing? And it's cool, but it's work. And then this person's like one dying wish was to come there and see everybody and meet the players. And he and Coach McDermott had a really nice talk. He tried to curse up the visiting locker room while he was here, and he ended up passing away a few months later. It just knowing that we were able to provide that for him, like that's definitely the best part of the job.
Yeah, I love getting to tell other people's stories and just getting to watch people kind of bask in it all, whether it's your fans who don't get to be around, that get to be around for that one day, or whether it's the players who are breaking records and having the best season of their lives. It's so fun to help tell that story and also be on the side watching it all happen. It is why I love working in the industry, is really getting to share who those athletes are beyond the jersey, beyond the helmet, and telling people who they really are as people. It's one of my favorite parts and why it keeps me, working 7 days a week during the season, because it makes it all worth it, especially winning 13 games in the AFC East title. That also makes it really worth it. And I'm really excited for next season already. So now that we've kind of covered what it's like to produce a story and some of the great memories that you have and why you love working in sports, I want to talk about also how you got into the industry. I mean, before you came to PSE, like you had mentioned, you were a producer at NFL Films and produced some pretty cool segments, including some inside the NFL stuff and some Hard Knock stuff. I mean, did you always know you wanted to be in sports and be a producer in sports? How did you get some of those opportunities when you were first getting your foot in the door? Because as we all know, it's not easy to get your foot in the door.
It's not. I mean, I feel like my story is so much about being in the right place at the right time. So I don't think I ever really knew I wanted to be in sports. When I was in college, I was the editor of our newspaper for a little bit. And the one day you know how college newspapers are, like the photographer couldn't go to a football game. So I was like, I'll just go take pictures. Like I have any idea how to take a photo. And, I was down in the field, like running around the sidelines with the camera. And I was like, this is pretty amazing. Like that feeling of being on the sideline, that was sort of my first rush where I was like, this is pretty cool. And then I moved to New York after college and started working with the New York City Bills backers, as I mentioned before. And I started writing like I guess it's a blog, but at the time we were calling it a column every week about what it was like to watch the game in the bar and like the experience of it. This was the 2004 football season. So we went 9-7 that year and just missed the playoffs because we couldn't beat the Steelers' third stringers. Not that I'm bitter. And yeah. So it was just such a fun, exciting experience. We brought Marv Levy in for a book signing. And like, I was just kind of like trying to find a job in New York, either in writing or communications, production, something. And, I was like, this is what I want my life to be. Like, I want to work for the Bills. Like, this is so much fun. Like, this is so much more fun than anything else I'm doing. Happened to have a coworker whose former college roommate worked at NFL Films. And I was like, I'll submit my resume. I don't really have a production experience. Like I was a writing major in college. So journalism, writing, English. And I was like, I don't know, we'll see what happens. And it just so happened they were hiring a bunch of people at that time. When I went down for my interview, they told me like, we hire writers that we can train to be producers. Like you can teach someone how to edit, you can teach them, even how to interview, how to, do all the technical aspects of it, but you can't teach someone how to write at this point, So if you're a good writer, you're a good storyteller, we want you, and we'll fill in the blanks. And so I had to do a writing sample, and they make you take a test. I don't know if they still do, but there's like a bunch of photos, to identify who all the people are. And it's like, athletes and figures in pop culture, like wow. Steve Sable, the founder of NFL Films, is on the test. I probably got it wrong.
NFL Films version of the Warlick test or the Wonderlic test.
Yeah, exactly. And it's so nerve-wracking. And like, there's these 4 guys at the time interviewing you, and I'll never forget when they were telling me about the writing sample portion. It was like, go home and write this and get it to us by Thursday. And of course you go and write it immediately, so you can show them you can hand it in right away. But Chris Barlow, who ended up being one of the producers on the Four Falls of Buffalo and was a great mentor at the time, I didn't know him. He was like, this is where we distinguish the people who can write from the people who think they can write. I was like, oh, okay. So yeah, so I guess they liked me. I was the first hire in their class that year, came in as a production assistant, learned everything. They taught me. I was editing when I was there, how to edit music, how to direct, how to interview. And got my start, like you said, working on Inside the NFL, which is still my favorite show ever. I just love that show. Writing all the puns and the fun lines, and like, it was such, when you talk about that camaraderie, like, 'cause we would all do the VO session. It used to be on Wednesdays and now on Tuesday mornings. So everyone like piles into the studio and like you hear everybody's lines, and there's just so much like back and forth on, oh, that was a great one, or like laughing at people and seeing everybody's segments up on the big screen. It was just such a fun show to work on. So that's probably my favorite. I mean, Hard Knocks is another great one, and I learned so much doing that as well. Obviously, was able to bring a lot of that experience to the Bills and Embedded and the shows that we do here. My favorite Hard Knocks memory might be, we were doing it with Dallas. They did their training camp in Southern California in Oxnard, and I was in the robo trailer. So we have all these robotics cameras in all the meeting rooms, and somebody is, we were controlling them from a trailer. So I had all these monitors up. And Tony Romo and Jason Witten used to sneak into the trailer during the coaches meeting at night. And like, they were not supposed to be in there, but I was like, in my 20s, like, what, there's no security or anything. What, am I going to kick Tony Romo out of the trailer? And he would come and watch the meetings and like, see what, it was at the time, Wade Phillips, head coach, see what the coaches were saying about like the roster while they were saying like, who's doing well, like where, slotting in their depth chart. I was like, oh my God, Coach McDermott, I would never allow that to happen here, by the way.
But never.
Never. Well, I'm also so much more comfortable with the guys here. I feel like you can't be here.
Yeah.
That's the difference. Or at the time I was like, okay, Tony Romo's here. Like, I don't know. Like, don't tell anyone. So yeah, it wasn't every night, but a couple times they would come in. So that was always funny.
I think everybody has a different story of how they got their foot in the door, what that big break was for them that allowed to kind of climb the ladder to where they want to be, whether it's working for their hometown team or whether it's getting to a network station. And it's so cool to hear, especially women, how they were able to start the process of working in sports and the different jobs they've been in. But what are some advice to the girls, to the ladies, the women on here who want to work in sports and think that there's too many men in it, or think that I don't know where to start because it seems like such a big beast and I don't know where the opportunities are? What are some words of encouragement for them?
Apply to the job. Like, I had zero video, production experience when I applied to NFL Films. I loved my team. That was it. I was a Bills fan who loved my team, and I wrote about my team, and that they hired me to be a TV producer. So, I would say, if you think like, I'm not qualified for this position, I'm not qualified for this promotion, there are probably 100 men who are less qualified than you who have already applied and are expecting that callback, because men just inherently have more confidence about these things, I think, and are not afraid to do that. Mm-hmm. So don't let them take your job. Like, apply and see what happens, and apply confidently and believe in yourself, and know what your good qualities are. And if you don't quite have the experience, talk up what you bring to the table, and make sure that they know that you are going to put in the work, and be prepared to do that too. This job, like this industry, is not for people who want to work 9 to 5, and you can talk about that better than anybody.
It is so true.
And I want to know, what would your advice be as a woman who's on camera? Like, I'm behind the camera typically, which I love because I get to ask all the questions without having to put myself out there, but you're out there. So what would your advice be?
Well, my advice on one side to your apply, my advice is, even if you're applying and you're not hearing back from people, figure out a different way to apply for maybe jobs that aren't even out there. That's how I got my first job at Stanford, which was basically part-time. I was making chump change and babysitting every day after work, but that was how I got in the door. And I got that job by brainstorming what I thought were the 50 big sports schools, so your Power 5 conferences, reached out to people who I thought would be maybe my boss in that type of media department, or if they had one like that. And so I basically put together a little email, attached my resume, and was like, hey, this is what I want to do. Do you have any opportunities? If not, please forward my email on to the right person, or reach out to me if there are opportunities. I sent out 50 emails. I probably got less than 10 responses back, which I thought was better than none. A month later, Stanford reached out to me and they're like, hey, we have this role. It may not be what you want, but do you want to apply for it? And it wasn't exactly what I wanted. It was pretty much all off camera. But that's how you kind of get into this industry. You have to be able to do everything and anything. If you want to be on camera, you also have to learn how to be off camera. You have to be a one-man band, is what my teachers would preach to me. You need to know how to shoot video. You need to know how to edit. You need to know how to tell stories. You need to know how to write. And then you need to know how to interview, and you need to know how to be on camera. So if you can do it all, that makes you a lot more attractive to someone who's going to hire you, because they want to hire people out of college who can do a lot for cheap money. And then you work your way into getting more money, and then you can be more specified in what you do as you work your way up that ladder and into new jobs. But my advice for being on camera would also be, don't let people get to you, because it is a nasty industry where men feel like they can pick apart women. Men who are on camera do not face what I face on a daily basis, and what a lot of other women in the industry face on a daily basis. People think that can pick apart how you sound, how you dress, how your hair is. The countless number of tweets that I get daily from people when I do on camera things that are not positive could really affect me and my mental state. but I try not to let them get to me. There's days where where you let people get to you, but just have a positive outlook. I also think it's so important to have a support system. I have a group text with all the other team reporters in the NFL, and we lift each other up and encourage each other. I hate that people feel like girls and women are pitted against each other. We are all on the same team. We should all want to see a lot of women in these types of roles. It doesn't mean that if someone gets a job that's a similar title as you, it doesn't mean that your opportunity is being taken away. It means that more women are being focused on and picked for these roles. We should all be celebrating women who are breaking into the sports industry and who are breaking barriers. So that's kind of my advice to everyone. I'm sure you would totally agree with that. But since it's Women's History Month, what are some of your thoughts on the barriers that we've seen that have been broken and the ceilings that we have seen shattered this year for women in this industry and in sports in general?
I love it. We've got a woman GM in MLB. We've got several women coaches across several sports. The first woman of color coach was finally hired, this offseason, which is amazing. We need more women of color in this industry in general. I think you would agree with that too.
Yes.
So, I think it's great. And I think, when you look around at all the smart women there are out there, like, look at someone like Rep. Katie Porter from California and how smart she is with her whiteboard and how she can just take people down. Like, imagine if she had I'm so glad she's representing us in politics, but imagine if she had been from the time when she was a kid focusing on sports, she could be an NFL coach, like someone that's smart and that focused on details. Like, women are not coaches just because they haven't been, and women are not GMs or in front offices just because traditionally they haven't been. You're going to tell me that a woman couldn't be a scout and who better than a woman to look at people, judge them, figure out, what they're really like, be able to, kind of use their intuition to say, this is the right guy or not, or to be a referee and have that attention to detail to say, hey, that's wrong. And to dole out a punishment. Like, there's no reason, there's nothing that women can't do. The only reason that you don't see more of them is because there aren't more of them already. So every barrier that's broken opens the door for the woman behind her. So it's so important.
Yeah. And one last question before we wrap things up. Why do you think it's important to recognize women and celebrate women during this month? And like I've said, whatever month we're celebrating, whatever, we should be celebrating it every single day. I said the same thing about Black History Month, and a lot of people pointed me in that direction. It's like, it's great we have February, but why not celebrate Black history every single day of the year? Because it deserves to be celebrated. And that's how I feel about Women's History Month too. Why do you think it's important for us to celebrate women and what they've done in this world?
I've been thinking about how at the beginning of my career, I would not have embraced the fact that I was a woman in sports. Like, you try to blend in.
Too.
You want to be one of the guys. You don't want them to notice that you're a woman. And, you get a lot of people that you interview being like, wow, you really know your stuff. Like, would you say that? I mean, maybe they would say that if there was a man interviewing them, but probably not, right? But you don't want anyone to notice that you're a woman, and why not? Like, women bring unique abilities to the table, and women are bosses, like you said at the beginning. Like, we can do anything. This sounds so like cliche, but I think that we should embrace who we are, and we don't have to be one of the guys to fit in this industry. We can bring our unique perspective, because that's beneficial for everyone. When you don't have a woman at the table, when you don't have people of color at the table, you're doing yourself a disservice. So, I'm part of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Council at PSE, which encompasses the Bills and Sabres, and I'm really proud to do so. And, our hope is that we can make, our little slice of this industry, more diverse and bring more voices in. And I think in the end, it's going to be beneficial for us, because when we're able to speak to more of our audience and to more of our fans, they will be more responsive and more, engrossed in our teams and feel more like a part of the family, which is the whole goal of doing all of this.
Yes, I completely agree. Michelle, thank you so much for hopping on Bill's Pod Squad with me to talk about the Growth Mindset documentary, your life in the business, and some awesome advice for our fellow women out there who want to work in this industry. The Growth Mindset documentary is dropping on Thursday, March 11th on YouTube at 7 o'clock Eastern time. You don't want to miss it. And also Friday, March 12th at 6:30 p.m. Eastern time on WIP WIVB TV Channel 4. Thank you all for tuning in to another episode of Bill's Pod Squad. We've got many more to come and many more cool guests as the league year gets rolling here in a couple weeks. So make sure you stick with us. We hope you have a great week. Michelle, thank you.
Thank you, Maddy Glab. Appreciate having me on.
Of course.